I'm Bob Grove, and we're talking about active transportation. Sara, when we finished up our last segment, you were talking about North Kansas City's role in its master biking plan and that kind. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, the role of government in creating this kind of environment that's supportive of active transportation.
Oh, sure. I think the role of government is obviously critical because, public streets are, a government responsibility. And, we can, as cities, we can design streets that are really intended just for cars, or we can design streets that are places for people. And I think that that's what you've really seen in the last few years is more of a focus throughout the country on creating streets that are places for people and not just a way to move people in cars as quickly as possible. Those are highways, and usually we don't spend a lot of time just relaxing and enjoying those. And I think it's also important to point out that streets are great places for us to come together as a community. It's, they do lots of jobs. Besides just moving people around. In the past year, especially, streets are a great place for people to, get outside of a building in order to, have dinner or to, have a drink or, we've got, some people who are, doing activities in our streets more now. So we need to design those streets to do lots of things. When we include people who are walking or biking or on a scooter, that forces us to think more about safety and, comfort and, just the, are they beautiful? And so that's really the thing that we were working on in our bicycle master plan is how do we kind of check all of those boxes for our streets and use bicycling facilities and adding those or improving those as a way to also improve safety and improve, the aesthetic appeal of our streets as part of all of that. So our master plan focuses on how do we use level of traffic stress as a way to evaluate whether a street works for people on foot or people on a bike. And when you start thinking about level of traffic stress, each street is a little different. So a street that doesn't have much traffic and the cars are naturally driving slower, well, if you're on a bike, that's less stressful than a street with a lot of cars where everybody's moving quicker, and that's more stressful. So this kind of forces us to tailor what we do to what the street is like. So a street like Armour Road in North Kansas City, you have to do more to make a bicyclist comfortable than a street like, if you're familiar with North Kansas City, than like a street like 23rd Avenue where cars go a little slower naturally and where there's less traffic because it's more of a neighborhood street. So I think it's our job as government to figure out how to make those big investments in streets to make them great places. And I know that, to get back to the rest of your panel for today, that's something that I think BikeWalkKC has really been encouraging people to do is think about, how all of those elements of a street come together, and, encouraging people to then also think about all the, once you've made that investment in your street, what does your municipal code say about bicycling and walking, and how do you help educate and people about how to do that safely, and what kinds of programming are you doing to encourage people to bike and walk? One of the things that we did recently was we approved an operating agreement with Bird Rides for them to deploy their scooters here because they're doing business in the right of way. We're involved in determining how they can do that safely. So, it's a real, somebody used the word ecosystem earlier. It is really an ecosystem when you think about how to make a community work well for biking and walking. And then that has spillover impacts in, your land uses and what people are doing off the street as well. Obviously, I could talk for a long time about that.
That's great. It is Bike Month. Is North Kansas City doing anything special for Bike Month?
Well, our mayor, Bryant DeLong, issued a proclamation declaring this as a Bike Month, and then presented that to a group that was doing a ride in North Kansas City last week or the week before the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
And we have provided some Bike North Kansas City swag to mark as part of their challenge for this month. So the people who get prizes for that will get some goodies from us. So it's, we would love to. I've seen a lot of people biking already this month in North Kansas City, and I would love to be able to run up and give each of them some kind of prize, because I always love seeing them. But those are the main things that we've done so far this month.
That's very cool. Natalie, across the metro area, are we seeing a lot of municipalities coming forward with declarations, and, are there challenges and stuff to encourage people to either continue biking or introduce them to biking or walking?
Yeah, absolutely. So RideShareKC is hosting our first ever Bike Month Challenge. So we're actually rewarding folks for biking and walking during the month of May. So any of the trips that you log on ridesharekc.org will be entered in to win weekly drawings. Not necessarily as great as it would be if we could run up to the cyclists and give them prizes right away. But still, we're able to reward folks for change in habits and just for getting outside and getting active. By the end of the month, we'll also be rewarding the individual who logged the most trips with a grand prize. So we're excited to be able to celebrate Bike Month with all the amazing cyclists and pedestrians in the region.
Well, you were saying something earlier about bike commute workshops.
Yes. Yeah, so BikeWalkKC has amazing educational resources all year round, but for Bike Month, we wanted to do something special, specifically tailored to bike commuters. A lot of folks have really been rediscovering the joy of cycling over the last year for recreation and for exercise. But in order to become a cycle commuter, there's a little bit more tools that you may need to have and some knowledge of some of the rules of the road. So we're hosting a couple of workshops in partnership with BikeWalkKC and some of their amazing expert certified instructors. The first is going to be virtual this Saturday, May 15th from 10 a.m. to 11:30. And the second is going to be in person, and that's Saturday, May 22nd from 10 a.m. to noon. So we'll be reviewing the rules of the road, practicing safe bike handling, and actually the in-person one will be doing a ride downtown in KCMO and the River Market to help folks familiarize themselves with traffic controls and urban riding.
That's very cool. Liz, talking about cycling and sustainability, you do a lot of activism, and I was hearing about your policy brief on transportation and climate. Can you tell us something about that?
Sure. So we know that transportation is one of the largest sectors for emissions in this country and really nationwide. One thing to note is that the EPA has said that the vehicle miles traveled, so that would be for like passenger cars and light duty trucks, so what most of us drive. We are driving almost 46% more between 1990 and 2017. So that means that more cars are on the road more often, and that means that emissions are increasing. Our policy at BikeWalk is that bicycling and walking, active transportation, they can be simple tools that address really complex problems. And that means that more biking and more walking reduces emissions, it improves health, it makes our cities safer and more connected. And if you think about a neighborhood where you can easily walk across the street to go say hello to your neighbor in the morning, or where you can ride your kids to school on bicycles, that is a much more stable and connected and welcoming neighborhood than one that sits right on a highway. The one that sits right on a highway with poor air quality and fast, dangerous roads. When you move at a human speed, we like to say it like that. When you move at a human speed, and you have human scaled streets, then you're solving a lot of complex issues that come from having people move too fast and from people really isolating themselves from each other.
Yeah, and you read the health benefits, and I mentioned cardiovascular earlier, but we also read there's a lot of psychological benefits to walking, biking, just that slower pace and being in nature. Liz, I heard you mention schools. I mean, that commute to schools. How do people go about identifying safe ways, safe routes to commute to schools? Is there a source for that, or?
Sure. So BikeWalkKC has a lot of resources on safe routes to school. And in fact, we partner with many local school districts and individual schools as well to help evaluate pickup and drop off zones and pickup and drop off plans at those schools. Something that I was surprised to learn when I first started working for BikeWalkKC is that the air quality around school zones is very poor. And kids spend a lot of time at school. And I believe it was the EPA that found that many schools are located near one of those heavily trafficked roads that I mentioned earlier. And then the pickup and drop off, if you have 50 cars sitting in a line and idling, waiting for their kids to come out of school, that air quality is very poor, and it has effects on the kids' lungs, it has effects on the kids' heart. And in fact, in the long term, that can have cognitive issues. Older people often who live near heavy trafficked roads and have poor air quality in their neighborhoods, they will often have more dementia issues than people that live in neighborhoods with better air quality. So we help people address pickup and drop off, and we also help people identify and even advocate for their schools to have safer streets. So whether that means better crosswalks, or whether that means reduced traffic areas, or perhaps some infrastructure that would help reduce traffic in that area, we help with all of that. That's
great. Alex, I'd like to close this segment with you. The role of government in active transportation.
I think about this a lot. Obviously, it's my job, but I think about this a lot. And it's a balancing act, right? It's a balancing act of thinking of trying to meet the needs of everybody in your community. At the end of the day, I always consider this an equity issue. So and several of our speakers today, Sara and Liz and Natalie, have kind of referred to this already. That there are there's a lot of people that are kind of disproportionately affected by some of these transportation side effects, these emissions, for example. So, and there's a lot of people that are affected that need the infrastructure in place to utilize that. When we think about households without a car, there are many of those, not just in our region, but across the country. And so we have to think about their needs and their concerns too. And when I say we, I'm talking about here at Mark, we're thinking about that, but municipalities are thinking about that too, thinking about how they can effectively build out their sidewalk infrastructure, creating potentially some bicycle infrastructure for folks, without it being seen necessarily as a gentrification kind of tool. The key there is clear communication between government, local and regional and even state, and the neighborhoods themselves.
That's a great topic. We're going to break and then just come back and discuss that some more. I'm Bob Grove, and we're talking about active transportation. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about activism and social equity.